Hi, and welcome everyone. I'm Pete Rizzo, editor at large at Kraken, the best place to buy and sell Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And I'm your host for this special edition Kraken live stream. 19K is here, but our all time high is far away. To discuss, I'm joined by Pete Humiston, director of research at Kraken. Pete will be joining us shortly to discuss his outlook on the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency market for today, November 24th, 2020. But first, some highlights from our most recent Kraken Intelligence monthly report, which you can download for free on blog.kraken.com. Why is Bitcoin surging on the month? Our analysts highlighted three key reasons. The first of those was hodler accumulation, roughly 70,000 Bitcoin left wallets holding over 100 Bitcoin during the month, suggesting larger whales were engaged in profit taking. However, demand from wallets with under 100 Bitcoin offset these sales. An end to technical indicators. As of October 31st, Bitcoin had been trading above 10,000 for 97 consecutive days. This meant the asset was entering rarefied air and that past price histories might no longer have been useful to traders. And the last trend they identified was institutional adoption. Grayscale reported record quarterly inflows of 1 billion in September, while Square announced a $50 million Bitcoin purchase. Developments that set off no shortage of positive news headlines for the market as a whole. So once again, you can download the report, surprise, surprise, higher highs on kraken.com and access more free Kraken intelligence at blog.kraken.com. So now our guests, welcome Pete, happy to have you today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So obviously, you're running the numbers, crunching the numbers for Kraken full time. So excited to dive in here as we've got a hot market going on. So wanted to begin there with just Bitcoin in the broader market. I know this is something you spend a lot of time tracking, how Bitcoin is faring against gold, how Bitcoin is faring against the S&P. I'm just wondering, as we're, exiting November, what are we seeing on these metrics? How does it look like Bitcoin is faring within the broader market to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, Bitcoin has been an outperformer to say the least. I think relative to traditional financial markets, the month started off and Bitcoin came out the gate running hot, and it already had been in October following kind of a rough September month, which coincided with also kind of weaker times for traditional markets, specifically equities in general. So what we've really kind of seen over the past few months here is Bitcoin really kind of go off to the races and really approach that kind of all-time high again of $20,000, which I think folks were, hopeful for, but not really anticipating it kind of becoming a reality as we head into the new year. So what we're really seeing, particularly today, is us just inch that much closer to the 20K level. It's obviously a big level, not just from a psychological standpoint, but presumably going to be a level, if and when breached, could lend insight as to whether or not Bitcoin is going to consolidate for the rest of the year or perhaps continue pushing higher as we head into 2021. So certainly excited to see what's to come. And it's nice to see that Bitcoin is outperforming traditional financial markets, particularly gold, which has had a rough couple of days, to say the least.
Interesting. Maybe you can take us into, what metrics are you watching right now? You mentioned the question that might be on your mind is, we're heading towards an all-time high. Does that mean we're going to see consolidation through the end of the year? What are you looking at? Obviously, that would be an interesting development, right? If you're saying here that, we might have seen the price action that we're going to see for Bitcoin in 2020.
Yeah, I've got a chart here that I'll pull up. It's the just Bitcoin over the past few months here. I mean, what you'll see is that since really the October timeframe, Bitcoin has been in this ascending channel. It's been in this slow but gradual grind higher, and then it's really kind of just accelerated over the past few weeks. And while this is something that is obviously bullish in the short term, it is on a technical basis often regarded as somewhat bearish. So right now, assuming that it continues to kind of play inside this current trend, I don't think it's crazy to think that over the next few days, if not next few hours, we see Bitcoin kind of breach that 20K level. But going back to the question, is that level going to be breached? Is it possible? Sure, it's possible. I think that a lot of folks are kind of anticipating, or at least making sure that they're positioned for a potential pullback. I do also think that some folks want to have that exposure in the off chance that we do rip through $20,000, and perhaps a lot of those folks that did put on a short at 20K even start to get liquidated, and we see a kind of a short squeeze really push this thing higher. It's pretty interesting, the obsessive the obsession that we really have with these round numbers, and a bias that humans have, and particularly ones that you see in markets, is this round bias theory. And it's this idea that there's these particularly special numbers that for whatever reason on a psychological basis, it really sticks to us, and we place a inordinate amount of attention and importance and value on it, when in reality it doesn't really mean anything too much. So I think that, that said, I don't want to say we're overhyping 20,000, but this is just another level that could swing one direction or the other, simply because of just it's obviously it's relevance in the past, and the fact that it is a big juicy number. So needless to say, I think that if you are trying to play this particular move, I think that a lot of folks are making sure that they have some skin in the game, while at the same time also making sure that they're positioned potentially for a pullback and for the consolidation heading into the new year.
Yeah, so I want to jump in there. Obviously, I think a lot of people coming in, maybe tuning into our Kraken live stream for the first time, just kind of getting savvy to Bitcoin. Obviously, we're talking here about technical analysis. We're looking at the charts. We're seeing what trends we can discern from historical buying and selling. You noted the psychological barrier of 20K. Obviously, the big reason there, it's been 3 or 4 years since we've seen Bitcoin at this price. But I wanted to go back to your chart. There was something on there that you said, it said overbought, and I just want to kind of pin down on that. So what does that mean? Why are you thinking that Bitcoin could be showing signs that its current rally is maybe overextending?
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. So one of the biggest technical indicators that folks use in the space and just in trading in general is the relative strength index. It's a 14-day measure of just kind of the overall momentum that exists within the market. And so a lot of folks use it to lend insight as to whether or not a particular trend has gone beyond its skis, or perhaps, there's going to be a reversal on the horizon. And something that we've seen since really, I think, mid-October, is that Bitcoin is held in this technical range that is considered overbought. And I think a lot of folks use this indicator to make trading decisions on. And that said, folks have kind of in this space pointed to it for a while now and said, this is a clear indication that what's going on right now is not sustainable, and perhaps we're due for a pullback. So while we have seen Bitcoin really be in this technical overbought range for a month, I guess, what you could push back on and say is that it's really not outside of the norm for Bitcoin to kind of get into these overbought ranges, particularly with respect to the relative strength index, and just kind of pace in and out of it as it really goes on this parabolic uptrend. This is something that you particularly saw in second quarter of 2019, as we went from that $4,000 level up to $14,000 around late June. Through that entire duration, you saw Bitcoin kind of move in and out of this technical overbought area. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, were burned because they had looked at this and said, this trend that's going on, it's not sustainable. But as history seems to show, it's, when Bitcoin wants to move, it really moves, and it can stay overbought for quite some time, and it can certainly hurt some folks.
Well, you mentioned history there. I know that you, in your monthly Kraken Intelligence reports, you spend a lot of time kind of looking at historical returns for Bitcoin by month. This is something you've included in every report, and I know that this, heralded, I think for us that September was going to be a weaker month, and helped us foresee and kind of predict that November and October we're going to bring a bit of price levity to Bitcoin potentially. I'm wondering if you're looking at. I know you're probably diligently preparing our forthcoming December report. What does December have in store, just in terms of historical trends, and what might people expect from that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, typically what we see is heading into the new year can be at times a little bit more volatile, and the returns can be somewhat an overall uptrend. But what I personally see as we head into December is kind of more of this FOMO that exists in the market. I think we really start to see it build up, particularly with respect to some of the traditional media outlets highlighting it and pointing to just the overall level of interest and growth that has taken place in the market over the past few months. And perhaps December could also bring with what I think we could see over this next week or so, or rather the next couple of days, is just more conversation on the retail side of things. It's the holiday season. Folks are having that time at the table to sit down and have a conversation and discuss what's going on in the world. And what's going on in the world is Bitcoin is certainly growing into prominence and exploding and attracting a lot of eyes and attention.
Yeah.
So I think that, December could certainly be another favorable month for Bitcoin in the broader industry. But I also think that as we approach this 20K level, we should be a little bit cognizant of this possibility of things perhaps cooling down and further consolidation as we head into what is presumably going to be an incredibly bullish 2021.
Interesting. Yeah, Bitcoin could end up on a lot of Christmas lists, I guess, there. So I guess I wanted to stay on some of the things and trends you've been following. I know your last report, one of my favorite data points that you surfaced was this idea that larger wallets were selling and that smaller wallets were accumulating. Right. That seemed to have been an October trend where it seemed like long-term buyers maybe were thinking that the market was overbought, as you just suggested. They started selling. That was getting scooped up by smaller wallets. Of course, these would be wallets with still over, I think it was 10 or 100 BTC, which is not a small amount either. So how are you seeing these trends with larger and smaller wallets? Is there anything we can glean about what kind of activity is going on in the market from that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think overall it really kind of speaks to a few things. I think first and foremost, assuming these whales are institutional players, it makes sense that they're starting to take profit and lock in those gains, particularly as they head into the end of the year and they have to do some annual reporting as far as performance. That totally makes sense. I think it also perhaps speaks a little bit more to just the more active nature of some of the whales, right? They have this incentive, or they are often trying to find these opportunities to trade in and out of position and maximize returns. So what we saw in the previous month was this exchange of where price started to really move. Some of those whales sold out, took profits, and that supply that hit the market was absorbed by some of the retail folks or smaller folks. And this is kind of a trend that we have seen since March, right? Where price moves, the larger folks sell out, that supply is captured by retail, price starts to consolidate a little bit, and then the process repeats where the whales buy into kind of that consolidation and they push things higher. I think this overall trend of selling into the strength and being open-minded to getting back in is particularly something that we've seen on the OTC desk. I work closely with those folks, and just as a quick plug, if you have interest in trading with the desk, feel free to reach out to us at otc@kraken.com. The flow that we've really seen over the past week or so is a lot of folks taking profits, bids moving higher, asks moving with price, people basically saying, hey, I want to stay in, but I also want to take some profit in the off chance that things pull back. So, the buy side demand really kind of resides around the 17 to 18K level right now, all things considered. While sellers do stand firm at $20,000. So interesting to see kind of how things will develop. But it certainly appears as though whales are ready to be scooping up further on any kind of pullback, and they're also ready to pounce on the right opportunity should things really start to rip.
Interesting. Well, I want to step back a little bit. I know for people who are just joining, the market or interested in Bitcoin for the first time, Bitcoin's a new technology, right? This is a monetary experiment that is going on. I guess as you're having more conversations about this with people maybe outside the industry, how are you explaining what's going on, right? I mean, I think people are looking at the market. They're seeing that Bitcoin was $10,000 in September. They're seeing it's almost double that price now. How do you explain that phenomenon? I know that, there's a lot of certainly numbers and indicators we within the market can look at to explain this. How are you explaining this to someone outside the market? That Bitcoin has doubled essentially in, a few weeks?
The short answer of it is that this is Bitcoin doing what Bitcoin does. When it's ready to run, it runs. But all jokes aside, I think that there's a handful of things and that I typically tell folks, and having once worked on the street, I still stay in touch with several folks on the institutional side of things, and they've reached out and expressed interest and asked some questions. So typically what I say is there's a few different things. I think it's just overall fear of inflation. Money printer go burr. Nobody knows what's going to happen and what's going to come of this, but needless to say, it doesn't hurt to be hedged should we see inflation really start to rip. I think that also speaks again to the other fact of the matter is that monetary policy is just, I don't want to say a mess, but there's a lot of question marks. Nobody knows what's going to come of this. The U.S. Fed has said we're going to keep interest rates at 0% all the way to 2023 at the bare minimum. Bitcoin is also being an uncorrelated asset. That's something that we've certainly really seen come to fruition over the past couple of months as it's really decoupled away from equities and gold after being somewhat strongly correlated over the past few quarters. Also, we've seen great institutional interest step up, and a lot of folks in the institutional realm come out and support Bitcoin, namely, obviously, Paul Tudor Jones, George Ball. We've seen several corporates add Bitcoin to their balance sheets. PayPal come out and announce their support for it. And the simple fact of the matter that Bitcoin has this tendency, as of at least now, to move in 4-year cycles. And we're kind of already coming off of 2 to 3 years of what we think could be that next cycle that's in play right now. And like all things, network related, Bitcoin is also feeling the tailwinds right now. And I think we'll really start to feel the tailwinds of just having these network effect that basically accelerates that next exponential move of user growth. So when you just take on all those variables and stack it together and you get more and more folks joining in for all different kinds of reasons, that interest and momentum kind of compounds and really starts to explode. And I think that's how we're getting this next leg. And that's how I think that next leg will come to light.
Yeah, it's interesting, describing Bitcoin as a stable economy in contrast to the current system, or a stable with a stable monetary policy. Of course, there's a limit on 21 million Bitcoins. New coin issuance is reduced every 4 years. So definitely things I think people are taking a second look at, as you said, within the context of monetary uncertainty. I wanted to move on to talking a little bit about the monetary experimentation side of cryptocurrency. So obviously, the market is not just Bitcoin anymore. We've seen a lot of activity in alternative cryptocurrencies as well, especially over the last week. We've really seen that return. Probably led by Ethereum, I think, which is still kind of the flag bearer of that side of the sector. What are you watching there? What do you think is causing that, and how do you see the dynamic between Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies at large heading into December?
Yeah, I mean, I think the relationship between Bitcoin and some of the other altcoins is very interesting. I think that what we always see, or what we've seen at least up until this point, is that there's obviously this market cycle where you see Bitcoin really start to move and appreciate. And along the way, you have some other cryptocurrencies for whatever reason start to move as well. Rising tide lifts all boats, obviously. But as you get kind of further into the cycle, you see folks who have this newly appreciated Bitcoin, and they kind of leverage that opportunity to get involved in some of the other cryptocurrencies, and that kind of rotation really starts to build and compound, and it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense that that folks think that more and more folks are going to take that Bitcoin and buy other cryptos, and that's going to drive it higher. And for that reason, people start buying, and then again, it becomes a reality. So I think that over the next year or so, we're going to really see kind of this push and pull between Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies. But I would suspect that in the near to medium term, Bitcoin is going to be the outperformer by and large. And perhaps towards the end of the cycle, you'll kind of see that rotation take place. And it will be really interesting to see if that dynamic does keep pace, particularly as we see some of these newer kind of institutional folks come into the industry and throw their stack of cash on the table, if you will.
Yeah, well, I guess I wanted to push back there a little bit. So we have seen one new catalyst, at least within the last week, which is of course, Ethereum reaching the threshold for its deposit contract to launch ETH 2.0. This is the long-awaited technical upgrade to Ethereum, promising to bring a number of different advantages to the many projects that are building on top of it. Is this something that you're looking at as you mentioned, of these coins kind of riding Bitcoin's 4-year cycle? What are we looking for to see if Ethereum is going to break out of that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that, this is something that we also talked about on our last volatility webinar with folks. We basically said that, the start of the month, there was some skepticism as it relates to Ethereum getting the necessary deposits to launch that Ethereum 2.0 contract. And I think some of that skepticism just kind of fell on top of Ethereum from a technical standpoint, and just the overall kind of market's bias or heavy interest in specifically Bitcoin. So, I think that what we're looking at to see whether or not this momentum will kind of really continue specifically for Ethereum is just kind of further development as Ethereum kind of gets that much closer to 2.0 launch, and just kind of seeing how the overall community reacts to some of these developments. I think that the progress we've seen on the deposited F for that contract launch over the past 24 hours has just been, it's been stellar. I mean, people have been so excited, and it's a big milestone. I think everyone's kind of gotten that much more optimistic about what's in store for Ethereum, and I think that the charts are reflecting that as well. We can pull up a chart here. This is the Ethereum USD pair on the 1 week time frame. This is a chart pattern that we've actually we've thrown in front of our subscribers of the OTC Daily, which if you're interested in signing up for, head over to kraken.com/subscribe/intelligence. And what you can see here is going all the way back to July of 2018, Bitcoin fell through this $500 level, at which point for the next couple years or so, it formed what we could call this cup pattern formation. It's this upward U shape pattern. And so what we saw just a few months ago was, Bitcoin finally came back up to that $500 level to test what was resistance, and it was rejected. And at which point we had came out and said, we think that this is an opportunity for a big bullish macro formation to potentially form on the weekly chart, and that is a cup and handle pattern formation. And so we said that there's this possibility of it kind of coming back down to the 3 level, which is what we see right here, bounced off of $315 support. And then just over the past couple of weeks, it has ripped back up through $500, that key critical level of resistance, thus forming the handle and igniting what could presumably be really kind of the start of Ethereum going parabolic. So I think, both from a technical and fundamental standpoint, I think that the setup here for Ethereum is incredibly attractive. And I think we've also seen a lot of folks start to express interest from the institutional side of things. You can kind of look at open interest for futures and the options market, and you can just see that those numbers have absolutely exploded. They've doubled since October 1st, and continues to see just real kind of more interest grow in Ethereum. And that's presumably something that will really kind of continue to take place as new entrants come into the market and learn a little bit about Bitcoin, and then say, all right, I'm familiar with Bitcoin, like what else is there? And obviously Ethereum is number 2 spot, and also well respected and regarded amongst the broader market.
Well, of course, always room for volatility in the crypto markets, and always unpredictable. But I guess I'll ask you to end with a prediction then. Do you think we'll see 20K? We'll see an all-time high this week? Pete Humson, Director of Research at Kraken. What say you?
This week? What about this hour? No. Yeah, I would take a bet and say that it could happen. It's a 5% move, not even away. Whether it punches through is a whole nother bet, and I'm totally not going to answer that. But yeah, I certainly think it's possible, and I sure hope so, because I'm ready to have a Thanksgiving dinner conversation of my own, talking about what it's doing and why it's doing it, and why you need to buy some right now.
Always good to get the family involved. Thanks, Pete. We appreciate your time. This has been a special edition Kraken live stream. I'm Pete Rizzo, editor-at-large at Kraken. We'll see you next time. Until then, happy trading, and hope to see you on Kraken.com.
Thanks, yeah.